Howard Cosell had survived everything. He defended Muhammad Ali when America called him a traitor. He stood up for civil rights when it wasn't just unpopular, it was dangerous. He faced death threats, lawsuits, and critics who tried to end him. And he won. Every time. For 3 decades, Cosell was untouchable. The most powerful voice in sports. A man who didn't just call games, he changed the way America talked about sports. But on a September night in 1983, it all collapsed. One sentence, 6 words, during a football game triggered the biggest scandal in broadcasting history. The man who built Monday Night Football, who dominated sports television, was done. What did he say? Why did it destroy him? And here's the twist. You'll be shocked to learn who stood by him when the world turned away. This is the rise, the reign, and the scandal that ended Howard Cosell. Howard Cosell didn't just arrive on television as the most polarizing voice in sports. His defiance, his confidence, those were forged long before he touched a microphone. It began in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, on March 25, 1918, when Howard William Cohen was born into a family of Jewish immigrants who had fled Eastern Europe to escape persecution. His father, Isidore, worked as an accountant, methodical and disciplined. His mother, Nellie, devoted her life to keeping the household steady. From the start, their message to young Howard was clear. Education is the weapon that will save you. That weapon became his obsession. Books were his battlefield. Brooklyn, where the family moved before Howard turned 3, wasn't gentle. It was noisy, chaotic, and filled with kids who fought to be heard. While most of them fought with fists, Howard learned early that words could cut deeper than any punch. He memorized speeches, recited poetry, and sharpened his tongue on playground arguments. This wasn't confidence, it was armor. In a world quick to size him up as an outsider, Howard's voice became his shield. By high school, that voice was finding an audience. At Alexander Hamilton High School, Howard became the sports editor of the school paper. His columns weren't fluff pieces, they were bold, biting critiques. He named names. He called out bad coaching. Teachers admired his sharp mind. Classmates thought he was arrogant. Howard didn't care. Being liked was never the point. Being heard, that was everything. When he entered NYU, Howard doubled down on his hunger for achievement. He graduated with a degree in English literature, then stayed on to earn a law degree. 2 degrees by 21, a sign of intellect, yes, but also a sign of something deeper. Howard wasn't content with good enough. He wanted to dominate every room he walked into. And yet, even then, something in him resisted the quiet, predictable life of a lawyer. He once admitted, "I was never satisfied with mediocrity. It wasn't in me to blend in." It was during this period that Howard made a decision that would echo through his life. He changed his name from Cohen to Cosell. Publicly, he said it was to honor his grandfather's original surname before Ellis Island anglicized it. Privately, it was strategic. Anti-Semitism ran deep in 1930s America, especially in media. A name like Cohen could close doors before they opened. Cosell wasn't running from his heritage. He was outsmarting prejudice. He wanted a name that stood out, a name that would be remembered. And Howard Cosell? That name had gravity. When the world plunged into war, Howard Cosell left the classroom for the front lines of logistics. He joined the U.S. Army Transportation Corps in 1942, a role that wasn't glamorous but demanded precision and nerves of steel. Stationed at the New York port of embarkation, Howard managed the movement of troops and supplies across the Atlantic, a high-stakes chessboard where one miscalculation could cost lives. At just 24, he rose to the rank of major, one of the youngest officers in his division. The experience hardened him, taught him command under pressure, and convinced him of something that would define his career. Authority is earned, never granted. But war also gave him something more intimate. A partner who would become his anchor for nearly half a century. Mary Edith Emmy Abrams, a spirited WAC sergeant, crossed paths with Howard during his military service. Their chemistry was instant, but the Army had rules. Officers and enlisted personnel weren't allowed to date. Howard, true to form, didn't ask for forgiveness. He demanded permission. He marched straight to a general and secured approval. That audacity wasn't just romantic. It was Howard in his purest form. Convinced that rules were obstacles for other people, never for him. Their wedding in 1944 was as unpretentious as their courtship was bold, a quiet ceremony in a Brooklyn judge's chambers. Emmy wasn't just a wife. She became Howard's moral compass, his reality check, and in private, his soft landing after every on-air battle. In an industry where ego consumed men whole, Emmy was the rare constant that kept Howard human. When the war ended in 1945, Cosell traded military greens for Manhattan gray suits. He launched a law practice representing soldiers, small businesses, and eventually athletes. His client list glittered with names like Willie Mays, a sign that Howard wasn't just practicing law. He was orbiting the world he longed to dominate: sports. His earnings climbed to $30,000 a year, a small fortune then, but money wasn't enough. Inside those oak-paneled offices, Howard felt caged. He once confessed, "I lacked sufficient mediocrity to survive in the law." While others relished stability, Howard fantasized about microphones, not courtrooms. He wanted an audience, not a jury. Howard Cosell's break into broadcasting wasn't glamorous. It wasn't even paid. In 1953, a struggling ABC radio station in New York offered him a tiny spot called Little League Corner. The premise was innocent: little leaguers interviewing big league baseball players. For Howard, it was the thin crack in the wall he had been waiting for. He took the job without hesitation and without a paycheck. For nearly 3 years, he juggled his law practice by day and radio scripts by night, clawing for airtime no one thought would matter. But Howard didn't treat it like a side gig. Even in that small, playful format, he approached the work with a lawyer's rigor and a showman's flair. His cadence was sharp, his language was deliberate, and most importantly, his questions weren't fluff. Where other hosts lobbed softballs, Cosell pushed. He wanted truth, not small talk. He understood something others didn't. Sports weren't just games, they were stories. Stories about character, ambition, failure, redemption. He would be the man to tell them. By 1956, the legal briefs were gone for good. Howard walked away from a secure law career to gamble everything on broadcasting, a move that even his friends called reckless. But Cosell wasn't chasing stability, he was chasing significance. That same year, ABC handed him his first personal platform, a short-form commentary show called Speaking of Sports. It aired daily and ran for decades. In an era when sports radio was full of cheerleaders and cliches, Cosell ripped the script to shreds. He was blunt. He was combative. He didn't just narrate games, he interrogated them. His voice became his signature weapon, deliberate, nasal, unyielding. It cut through the static like a gavel striking wood. He would say things no one else dared, calling out bad coaching decisions, questioning officiating, even criticizing the leagues themselves. He challenged the sacred rule of sports broadcasting: don't make enemies. Howard made them by the dozen, and wore that as a badge of honor. Critics called him arrogant, fans called him obnoxious, but one thing was undeniable: America was listening. What made him different wasn't just his tone, it was his willingness to go where others wouldn't, into race, politics, war. When most broadcasters stuck to final scores, Cosell asked why athletes were denied basic rights off the field. He saw sports as a mirror of society, and he forced that mirror in front of millions. Some hated him for it. Others hailed him as a pioneer. Either way, Howard Cosell wasn't just in the game anymore. He was changing it. By the mid-1960s, Howard Cosell had become a recognizable voice on ABC, but what came next would transform him into a cultural force. That transformation began with a young fighter from Louisville who spoke in rhymes, taunted opponents, and declared himself the greatest. His name was Cassius Clay, at least that's what the world called him before 1964. On February 25th of that year, Clay stunned Sonny Liston and the boxing world by taking the heavyweight title. The very next day, he announced a name change: "I am Muhammad Ali." The backlash was immediate and merciless. Sports writers refused to print it, broadcasters ignored it, newspapers mocked him. To most of America, Ali was brash, arrogant, and, now, a traitor to his roots. But one man refused to bend to that tide: Howard Cosell. On live television, Cosell looked into the camera and said the name clearly: Muhammad Ali. No hesitation, no caveat. In that single act, he didn't just acknowledge a man's identity, he made a statement about respect and autonomy at a time when the country was choking on racial division. And that wasn't the end of it. When Ali refused induction into the U.S. Army in 1967, citing his faith and opposition to the Vietnam War, the punishment was brutal. Stripped of his title, banned from boxing, vilified as a draft dodger and traitor. While most of the media piled on, Cosell stood firm. He went on air and called the government's actions inhumane and a violation of his rights. Advertisers threatened to pull out. Executives warned him to back off. He didn't. Howard Cosell, the son of Jewish immigrants who had known prejudice firsthand, recognized what was happening and refused to be complicit. What followed was one of the most unique partnerships in television history. Their interviews became more than sports segments. They were theater, debate, and social commentary rolled into one. Ali would tease Cosell about his toupee, calling him ugly, slow, and Howard the Coward. Cosell shot back with biting sarcasm, challenging Ali on every boast, dissecting his every claim. The banter was electric, but beneath the jokes was deep, mutual respect. Ali trusted Cosell because Cosell never tried to silence him. And Cosell admired Ali because he never ran from the storm. One of their most iconic exchanges came during Ali's suspension from boxing. With the world calling him a pariah, Cosell invited him on air. The two sat across from each other, the tension visible, and then something shifted. The jokes faded. Cosell leaned in and asked, "Do you ever think you made a mistake?" Ali, unwavering, said no. That moment didn't just humanize Ali, it reframed him for millions watching at home. Through Cosell's lens, Ali wasn't a villain. He was a man of principle. Together, they broke barriers. They forced sports coverage to address issues of race, religion, and politics, subjects that television executives considered radioactive. In doing so, they changed what a sports broadcast could be. For Howard Cosell, it wasn't just about calling fights anymore. It was about calling out hypocrisy. And that conviction made him the most controversial and most important voice in sports. By 1970, Howard Cosell had already become a household name, but the next move would catapult him beyond sports broadcasting. It would make him a national obsession. That year, ABC executive Roone Arledge launched an experiment that sounded insane at the time. Put professional football on television in prime time, on a Monday night when most Americans were watching sitcoms or variety shows. The project was called Monday Night Football, and Arledge knew it needed more than just play-by-play commentary. It needed personalities, it needed friction, it needed theater. Enter Howard Cosell. He wasn't a former athlete, he wasn't folksy or charming, he was combative, cerebral, and unapologetically opinionated. Arledge paired him with Frank Gifford, the Golden Boy ex-quarterback, and Don Meredith, the charismatic former Dallas Cowboys star. The chemistry was explosive. Gifford played the calm mediator. Meredith brought humor, often needling Cosell on air with his country wit. And Cosell? He was the lightning rod, the man viewers loved to hate and hated to miss. From the very first broadcast, the show felt different. This wasn't just football, this was primetime drama. Cosell didn't sugarcoat, he didn't just describe a touchdown, he framed it as a narrative, building tension like a novelist. His trademark phrase, "He could go all the way," wasn't just a call, it was theater. Every play became a story of triumph or disaster. His voice cut through living rooms like a verdict, measured yet dramatic, impossible to ignore. The gamble worked. Ratings soared beyond ABC's wildest dreams. Within a year, Monday Night Football wasn't just a program, it was a cultural ritual. Bars packed out, families rearranged dinner plans. For the first time, football wasn't confined to weekends, it owned America's work week. Advertisers paid record rates. Arledge had revolutionized sports television, and Cosell was the face of it. But success came with its own storm. The more visible Cosell became, the more polarizing he was. Traditional fans despised his highbrow vocabulary and perceived arrogance. Critics skewered him in print, calling him everything from pompous to unbearable. Some newspapers even ran weekly Howard Cosell hate columns. But for every detractor, there was a loyal viewer who tuned in just to see what he'd say next. Cosell wasn't just a broadcaster, he was an event. Behind the cameras, though, the pressure mounted. The schedule was brutal, the spotlight relentless. Cosell began drinking heavily before and after broadcasts. Tensions with Meredith and Gifford simmered, sometimes boiling over into on-air awkwardness that only fueled public fascination. Cosell understood that controversy was currency, but the cost, personally and professionally, was starting to add up. Still, nothing could slow him down. For more than a decade, Monday Night Football wasn't just America's game. It was Howard Cosell's stage. Cowboys versus Redskins. Washington's Alvin Garrett makes a play. Cosell says, "That little monkey gets loose, doesn't he?" 6 words. Phones at ABC light up. By morning, newspapers scream racism. Civil rights leaders demand an apology. Sponsors threaten to pull ads. Cosell insists he meant nothing racial. He'd use the same phrase for white players and even his grandkids. Muhammad Ali defends him. Jesse Jackson defends him. Alvin Garrett himself says, "I wasn't offended." But it doesn't matter. The storm is too big. By season's end, Cosell is gone from Monday Night Football. After leaving MNF, Cosell keeps working radio, but his fire dims. Then tragedy strikes. In 1990, Emmy, his wife of 46 years, dies of cancer. Howard is shattered. Within a year, he's diagnosed with his own cancer. Then heart disease, Parkinson's, strokes. By 1992, he retires completely. On April 23, 1995, Howard Cosell dies at 77. His obituary is a war zone. Some call him the greatest sports broadcaster of all time. Others remember only the scandal. Howard Cosell didn't just call games. He changed how America talked about sports. He made it serious. He made it cultural. He made it matter. He was loud, he was proud, and whether you loved him or hated him, you never forgot him. Question for you. Was Howard Cosell unfairly canceled, or did he cross a line that couldn't be ignored? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and check out the next video on your screen. And if you want more stories that change sports forever, stay tuned.